Not only did Curry Barker never read Save the Cats, he sought out every single copy and burned them. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we are reviewing Obsession, written and directed by Curry Barker, starring Michael Johnston, Inde Navarrette, Cooper Tomlinson, and Megan Lawless. This movie follows a hopeless romantic, or really just the worst guy you could ever ask for, wishing for his crush to love him more than anyone else in the world, with the consequences of his wish bringing out a lot more suffering than he could have ever imagined. And I'll of course be getting to spoilers for Obsession, so if you haven't had a chance to watch it just yet, definitely go check it out, as it is by far and away my favorite horror film of the year, and one that genuinely shook me to my core.
If you read the back of the box...
Is it even real?
Yeah, it's real.
No, I know that the... Is her love real?
So the first thing that I have to praise about this film is the direction from Curry Barker, who had his YouTube film Milk and Cereal go viral a couple years back. And I remember being very inspired by that film, which showed Barker's passion and what he was able to accomplish with just a couple bucks and a camera. Fast forward 2 years later, and we get this film where he really just gets to show off at this point for an hour and 46 minutes. This film really got under my skin in a way that a film hasn't really done in quite some time. This is the exact type of horror film that scares me personally. Super jumpy films like Insidious or even Hokum to a certain extent are great. I love those movies, but the jump scares accompanied by the classic horror movie violence sting just really doesn't get me like it does for many others. What does scare me are films like Hereditary or Longlegs, where the horror comes through the impending dread you feel throughout the entire runtime. Barker never lets a loud sound effect release the tension from the audience until the climax of the film. From the first moment you see Bear, played by Michael Johnston, make his wish, Inde Navarrette's absolutely demented performance begins with something as simple as her just standing in the doorway menacingly. And from that moment on, with every single weird and unsettling thing that she does, Barker has a stranglehold on the audience and never lets go. And I can't let the film's editing go undervalued either here, as Barker also acted as the editor for this film. The moments that he chooses to hold onto a frame, like Inde's terrifying smile that was very reminiscent of Mia Goth's Pearl, plays very well against your expectations on how film is generally edited, adding so much to the uncomfortable states the movie puts you in. And the reverse shots and speed ramping, absolutely terrifying. Those moments never cease to freak me out. But alongside Barker being a standout presence inside of this film, you have Inde Navarrette, who gives one of my favorite performances this year. She genuinely scared the shit out of me. And when it comes to horror performances over the last few years, Naomi Scott in Smile 2, Mia Goth as Pearl, Lupita Nyong'o in Us, Nicolas Cage in Longlegs, and of course the great Toni Collette in Hereditary comes to mind as truly standout performances in horror, and now I can happily add Inde to this list.
No, don't do that! I thought we were having a nice day!
We are.
Why does it matter? I thought we were having a nice day!
The premise of this movie lies in Bear being truly helpless in his attempts to win over his crush, even when she literally asks him if he likes her, which I'll get into my grievances with Bear as a character in a moment. But when he fails to communicate his feelings, he makes a wish using the One Wish Willow, pleading for Nikki to love him more than anyone else in the entire world. And before this point, Inde's performance as Nikki was exactly what you expect from what you heard about her from Bear's perspective. She is charming and incredibly kind, and with her telling Bear that she plans on putting in her 2 weeks at their shared job, you understand why Bear feels the pressure to confess his feelings before time runs out. And although there are fleeting moments where you feel like she could feel the same way about him, it becomes very clear at the end of their drive home that she doesn't, and that it's heavily alluded to that their mutual friend Sarah actually has a thing for Bear. So we've clearly established that the real Nikki is someone who is a great friend, trying to push Bear to see the person who actually does have a crush on him, all while establishing their own friend zone. So when her complete shift in personality happens, it isn't an uncanny change in behavior. Inde plays both versions of Nikki in completely different manners, with the title Obsession honestly feeling like an understatement. The movie wastes no time to unsettle you through Nikki's behavior, with that first night introducing the true horror in the complete disregard to consent that this witch from Bear has created, with the true Nikki's brief cries for help being one of the most unsettling aspects of her performance. Love the moments where you hear her screams over the customer service helpline, which was a hilarious scene, or her pleading to Bear to end things when the fake Nikki was asleep. Whenever Nikki was on screen, I was deeply unsettled, just waiting at the edge of my seat for her to do the always unprofessional unpredictable thing, like standing in the corner of the room watching Bear sleep, the abrupt switches from her loving voice to screaming at the top of her lungs, the unspeakable things that she did to that poor cat, waiting at the door in her own piss until Bear came home, the absolutely demented monologue at the party, followed by the incredibly funny way she moved Sarah away from being on Bear's left to her self-harm whenever Bear failed to show love back towards her. There's just so much, honestly too much, that she did that freaked me out, to the point where her nickname Freaky Nikki felt like quite a tame one by the end of the film. But now let's move on to the true villain of this story, being Michael Johnston as Bear, who truly did nothing right inside of this entire film. It's hard for an actor to play a truly frustrating and unlikable character, yet still feel engaging throughout the entire story. But somehow Johnston was able to accomplish just this. You could tell that deep down, Bear truly knew that what he was doing was wrong. He could tell immediately that Nikki was acting in ways that she would never actually act, but he couldn't help but to take advantage of her this entire film. And it shows in his performance as he becomes more and more desperate for things to somehow work out, for her to act normal despite all the deeply disturbing things that she did throughout this film. Like, how do you see your front door taped shut with a comically large amount of duct tape and not immediately try to reverse whatever curse is put upon this person you're supposed to love? Crazy. But I honestly had so much fun staring up at the screen, screaming in my head that every choice he made in this movie was just awful, and watching him slowly dig himself further and further into a pit too deep to ever escape from was endlessly entertaining. We also had two supporting characters here, with Cooper Tomlinson as Ian and Megan Lawless as Sarah. Ian being the friend that Bear thought he could confide in, although looking back, all the times he was giving Bear advice for asking Nikki out completely gets thrown out the window, knowing that he was apparently hooking up with her the entire time. And although I did enjoy his performance and the humor that he did bring to this character, I do think that this character, especially compared to all the other ones, he didn't really add up to too much here besides his attempt to bring Bear back down to earth, mentioning how weird Nikki had been acting all of a sudden, which, I mean, we can also just see that. His final scene honestly didn't entirely work for me, with Bear trying to get him to undo his wish by having Ian wish that he had never wished his wish, but he instead wished for $1 billion. And it wasn't the fact that the billions of dollars just started magically raining from the ceiling that took me out of this scene, despite that moment being incredibly silly as compared to the rest of the movie, but rather that it was the second scene in a row after my favorite scene inside of the entire movie, which didn't feature Nikki's character. Bear going back to the store he bought the One Wish Willow at accomplished the exact same thing that this scene with Ian did, which was to say that there was no real way to reverse the situation that he found himself in. And then Ian is just shot in the head when he barges into the final scene, so yeah, this character didn't add too much to the movie for me, besides just a couple things here and there. But Megan Lawless, on the other hand, added a ton to this film, which I was absolutely dreading to see what in the world Nikki was going to do to this poor character by the end of this film. I was horrified by what was going to happen here. We eventually do get further confirmation that Sarah liked Bear this entire time, which further adds to my frustrations with Bear being the biggest idiot of all time. The scene at the music shop before the cat sandwich reveal had me really charmed by their chemistry. And the party scene with Bear pulling the Jenga block saying to kiss the person on his left, which was of course going to be Sarah, set up one of the most uncomfortably funny moments inside of this entire film.
Jeez, what kind of spells you put on her?
I just love that entire scene, but I just knew something terrible was eventually going to happen to this character, which finally did come when they did decide to meet up in the middle of the night. But the thing that I wasn't expecting was how this scene went down. It was absolutely horrifying. For the entire scene with them talking in the car, I was staring out that window waiting for Nikki to show up in the background, standing there menacingly, or slowly walking up to the window like that one character did in Weapons with the Scissors. I was just expecting that moment to happen, but no, she came in full sprints, shattering the window and poor Sarah's face in seconds, and it had me actually audibly scream at the screen, which I honestly can never recall ever happening to me before. And this is where I go back to praising Curry Barker's direction once more, as this is the moment he finally releases the tension after building it up across every single second Nikki was on screen. Genuinely terrified me and will go down as one of the most memorable scares I've seen in a movie. And of course, RIP to Sarah, who literally did nothing wrong throughout this film, and Nikki was 100% right in saying that this was entirely Bear's fault. As the film was going on, I was counting in my head the amount of ways that this movie could possibly end, and the film pretty much did every single one of them. You could have someone wish away Bear's original wish, which failed miserably due to Ian's greed. Bear could take his own life to set the real Nikki free, which he tries to build up the courage to do so, but like his failure to ask her out in the first place, he was too much of a coward to do just that. And the potential ending that I was dreading the most in this movie was that the obsessed Nikki would somehow get a hold of the One Wish Willow and wish that Bear would love her more than anyone else in the entire world, which is exactly what happens. But with the One Wish Willow always forcing the character characters to reckon with the consequences of their wishes, the obsessed Nikki's wish stops Bear from puking up the pills, which leads us back to the ending where Bear dies, therefore breaking Nikki's curse before she could pull off the very twisted Romeo and Juliet version of their doomed romance. And of course, that is where the movie ends, with the real Nikki finally being set free, realizing that she's sitting in a room with all her friends dead around her as her screams lead us to the credits. Fantastic ending.
I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you!
But those are just going to be my thoughts on Curry Barker's Obsession. As you can probably tell, I am still high off the experience of watching this movie. It might just be my favorite film of the year so far, with it being neck and neck with Project Hail Mary, but I'll have to give them both another watch before I can truly decide. And honestly, if I could have one wish from the One Wish Willow, it would be to experience this movie again for the first time, as it was such a treat. But now I pass the question off to you. Will this be your next horror obsession, or will you firmly put this in the friend zone? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, if you did enjoy this review, make sure to leave it a like and subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this. We are in the middle of a great summer for horror with Hokum just a couple weeks ago, and we of course have Passenger and Backrooms right around the corners, so make sure to stay tuned on the channel for my thoughts on both of those films. So thanks everybody for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next one. Now off to see Obsession again for the first time.